The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. Jesus departed from there and came to his native place, accompanied by his disciples. When the Sabbath came, he began to teach in the synagogue. Many who heard him were astonished. They said, "Where did this man get all this? What kind of wisdom has been given him? What mighty deeds are wrought by his hands? Is he not the carpenter, son of Mary, brother of James and Joseph and Judas and Simon? Are not his sisters here with us?" And they took offense at him. Jesus said to them, "A prophet is not without honor except in his native place, and among his own kin, and in his own house." So he was not able to perform any mighty deed there, apart from curing a few sick people by laying his hands on them. He was amazed at their lack of faith. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you.
When I am weak, then I am strong. When I am weak, then I am strong. That's a paradox. It's a paradoxical statement. Drives some people nuts because they don't understand it. When I am weak, then I am strong. A paradox is a statement which has two elements, which to our common sense can't possibly be true at the same time, but they are. They are true in spite of our common sense. They are true. That's what Paul's talking about when I am weak, when I am strong. Paul was a very aggressive, opinionated, high energy kind of young man. He took pleasure in persecuting the Christians when he was a Pharisee, and he was out to arrest a bunch of them in Damascus when he met Jesus. Changed his whole life, because all of a sudden he realized that all of that strength and confidence and power he thought he had was nothing compared to what Jesus was giving him. It would take a while for Paul to integrate that attitude into his spirituality, though. In his early letters, he's still forceful, confident. He's running the race. He's going to win it. He's going to get that crown. But by the time he comes to his letter to the Romans, which was his last letter when he was in jail in Rome, his whole demeanor has changed. He's become very passive in the presence of the Lord, become an instrument of the Lord's work. He describes himself as an aroma, not even smoke, but aroma from the sacrifice of Jesus. And so his whole attitude changed. But what he's saying in his letter to the Corinthians is that when I'm in that weak spot, then I'm strong. We might experience that in our lives. When you're in your 20s, lots of confidence. Know a lot. Parents don't know much. Just move into life. I got it. I got this one. We're going to be fine. Riding the wave, right at the top. But then, life has a way of changing that. We start experiencing failures, disappointments, losses. Plan A didn't turn out. What happened to the 5-year plan? Went away. Something's happened. Maybe we lost our job. Maybe we've gotten sick. Maybe we lost an opportunity or wanted to go someplace and can't go there. And so what that does is it makes us go down to the weak spot. We can feel vulnerable. When we're riding the wave or at the top, You don't even need God. Don't need him. I'm in charge. I'm doing this. But when we get knocked down to the bottom, then we need God. And we know we do. We open ourselves, just like Paul did, to the grace of the Lord. But we have to go to the bottom to experience that. But that's when we're strong, because we're relying upon the Lord and not living in that artificial level of success. We found that we need God in our lives, then we're strong. Then we are strong. In the first reading from the book of the prophet Ezekiel, Ezekiel is sent to the people by the Lord. The Lord is telling Ezekiel to go and preach to them. But you're going to have a difficult time because they are hard of face and obstinate of heart. Just think of that image. Hard of face, obstinate of heart. Maybe you've known people like that. You can't really talk to them. They're all into all their opinions. They don't really care about anybody but themselves. Hard of heart, obstinance. And so Ezekiel goes and he preaches to them, and they convert, they change. Because of his preaching, they have opened themselves up to the grace of God in their lives. They're not in control, they're not hard of heart. They become more vulnerable. Might call it weakness, but it's really strength. They become more vulnerable to the presence of the Lord. The Lord tells Ezekiel that after he's spent time with them, those people will know that a prophet has been among them because he's had a big impact on them. We have in the gospel today the account of Jesus going home. He's going back to Nazareth. He's established himself in Capernaum along the Sea of Galilee with his disciples. But now he's going to go home for a visit. Nazareth is not that far from Capernaum, but it is uphill, about 20 miles. It's a bit of a walk. But he goes to Nazareth and spent time certainly with his family and people that he knew. He grew up there for 30 years. It's a little town. Scholars say maybe 200, 400 people at best. Most of them are Jesus' relatives. It's like a family compound. They were very tribal, very family-oriented in that culture. The whole town of Nazareth are related to each other. Mary and Joseph are related to one another. It was a very close-knit community. But Jesus is there, and on the Sabbath, he goes to the synagogue and stands up to preach. That was allowed. You don't have to be a rabbi to preach in the synagogue on Sabbath. So Jesus did. We don't know what he told them, but in the aftermath, from what the people were talking about, first they were amazed at what he said. Then they were shocked. Then they got angry. They didn't like this. He's violating the norms. Jesus, you're not supposed to be like this. How did you get all of this? You're a carpenter, and you should act like one. Joseph was a carpenter. Jesus followed in his footsteps as a son would with his father, and he became a carpenter. There probably wasn't much carpentry work in Nazareth in those days. Once the carpenter made you a table, you didn't probably need him for a long time. And so scholars say he and Joseph probably went to Sepphoris, which was within walking distance of Nazareth. It was a city that King Herod was building. And they very likely worked there as a carpenter, stonemason, iron person. And so he would have left Nazareth from time to time just to make a living. But now he's back, and the people want him to stay a carpenter. They don't like that change. And he's not only a carpenter, he's son of Mary. That's a pejorative statement. He's son of Mary. And what the scholars say, what that indicates, Joseph at this time is dead. Because they would never say that about Mary if Joseph were still alive. He would not have let the men get away with that. He's a carpenter. He's a son of this woman. How dare he take on airs and preach to us? And so Jesus comments at the end of the gospel, That a prophet, like Ezekiel, is an honorable position, always with honor, except in his own town, among his own kin, and with his own family. Because their natural response will be, how can you do this? You're nothing but a carpenter. Other people down in Capernaum, they've never known Jesus before, and he preaches to them, and they think it's great. He's a great preacher. Nazareth, no, I don't think so. You should stay a carpenter. And we can experience that in our lives. We might find ourselves trying to get somebody to stay the same. Maybe a spouse, maybe a child, maybe a relative or a friend. We don't want them to change. We want them to stay the same. Don't you go off and do something like that. That's way above us. Don't you dare go out and become famous. Don't you dare do this amazing stuff. The reason for that, according to systems theory, is that when one part of the system changes, it forces the whole system to change. It can't stay the same if that part changes. And that's the same with people. If you have a spouse or child or a friend or a person you know trying to do something that puts them above you in your eyes, that's threatening. And we may try to very subtly go out of our way to stop them, talk them out of it, discourage them, tell them they can't do that. That's what the people of Nazareth are doing with Jesus. But Jesus continued on in his ministry, didn't let that dissuade him, but he hopefully brought to those people of Nazareth eventually a sense of openness to God. They had a heart of face and opposite of heart like the people at the time of Ezekiel. But hopefully over time, they relented. As Jesus progressed in his ministry, died on the cross and was raised from the dead, hopefully that changed them so that they would allow him in their own mind to let him be himself. Let him grow according to the call of the Father. And that's what we are called to do, to encourage all the people around us to do what the Lord is calling them to do, not stand in their way. And don't let them stand in our way. If we have something that the Lord is calling us to do and we want to do that, maybe we ought to do it. Gee, what will people think? Gee, I wonder if they let me get away with it. That's a very common and natural response, but it takes courage on our part to put ourselves in a vulnerable place by doing something maybe that people don't approve of, but it's something we think so important we should do that. And so when we're weak, when we're in that vulnerable space, that's when we're strong, because we're not listening to all of them and their naysayers and all of the negative comments. We're listening to the Lord and following what the Lord is calling us to do.